I quit answering my own phone 3 years ago. People think it's a grief thing, and I let them think that, because the truth makes me sound like a man who needs help. And maybe I do, but not the kind they'd offer. The truth is that I spent 11 years as a fire watch and groundsman for a memorial cemetery. And the work that ruined me had nothing to do with the dead in the ground. It had to do with the living ones who kept walking out of the brush at the back fence line, asking me to take them home on nights when there was no one out there at all. I want to set it down once, plainly, because I'm getting older. And I don't trust my own version anymore. And writing it is the only way I know to find out which parts I made up. For 8 years, nothing. I want to be fair to the timeline. I worked that post for 8 years, and the radio at night was exactly what it should have been. Dead air and my own voice. I'd hear the occasional skip of a trucker's CB bleeding through on a cold, clear night, a fragment of some hauler talking about a way station, and I'd smile and go back to my coffee. That's normal. Any radio man will tell you about skip. So when it started, the first one, I filed it under skip, because skip was the explanation that let me keep the night quiet. And a night man learns to love the explanation that keeps the night quiet. The first one came in March of my 9th year. I remember the month because the ground was still hard, and we'd had a late frost, and I'd been worried about the irrigation lines. I was at the desk a little after 2 in the morning doing nothing, and the base station crackled. And a woman's voice came through, calm, a little tired. The way people sound when they've already accepted whatever is happening. She said, "We need a unit at the corner. My husband's gone down, and he isn't answering me." That was all. No location that meant anything. No corner of any cemetery. And the thing that put a cold finger on the back of my neck, before my brain even caught up, was the cadence of it. That is exactly how a real emergency call sounds. Not panicked, flat, defeated. I'd taken 1,000 of them. People on the worst night of their life don't scream into the phone. They go quiet and practical, like they're ordering at a counter. This woman sounded like every wife I ever met at a door at 3 in the morning. I keyed up before I thought about it. 14 years of training does that. You hear a person in trouble, your thumb goes to the button. I said, "This is Hollow Reach Security. Say your location. Are you on the grounds?" And there was nothing. Dead air. I tried twice more. Nothing. And then I did the reasonable thing. The nightman thing. I told myself it was skip. Somebody's home scanner or a baby monitor or a dispatch channel 3 counties over bleeding in on a freak of cold air. And I wrote it in the log, 0207, radio skip, female voice, no contact, and I went on with my shift. But I'll be honest with you because the whole point of this is honesty. My hand wasn't steady when I wrote it. And the reason wasn't fear, not yet. It was that the voice had reached the part of me I'd quit the ambulance to protect. Somebody had said my husband's gone down and isn't answering. And everything in me that used to be good at my old job had stood straight up and wanted to go. I sat there wanting to help a woman who did not exist, and that wanting scared me worse than the voice did. Let me tell you the job first, because the job is the thing nobody understands. Hollow Reach Memorial Park was a 200-acre cemetery in Arboretum, at the edge of a county that had more dead people in it than living ones, if you counted right. Old families, 3 and 4 generations down in the ground, and a long sloping lawn that ran from the chapel at the top down to a creek and then a stretch of woods we called the back acreage, which was unconsecrated and overgrown and mostly just there to give the developers something to keep wanting. My title was Facilities and Grounds Technician, but the part that mattered was the overnight piece. Cemeteries get vandalized, mostly by bored kids, sometimes by people looking for copper or bronze off the markers. And the insurance wanted a body on site from dusk to dawn. That body was me, 4 nights a week, in a little stone gatehouse near the main entrance that had a desk, a space heater, a landline, a radio, and a wall of black and white monitors fed by cameras that had been new in maybe 1998. I took the job because I needed something quiet. I'd been a paramedic before, 14 years on an ambulance, and I'd left it the way a lot of us leave it, not in one dramatic break, but in a slow leak. Until one shift I sat in the bay and couldn't make my hands open the door. There was a call near the end, a bad one. A kid we worked on the floor of a kitchen while the mother stood in the doorway. And we did everything. We did it right. And it didn't matter. And afterward, my partner wrote it up clean, and I signed it, and I went home, and I never went back. I'm telling you that because it's the wound. And the wound is the whole story. I spent 14 years answering calls from people on the worst day of their lives. I was good at it. And then one day I decided I would rather watch over people who couldn't ask me for anything, who were already past help, who would never need me to get there in time. A cemetery is the only place where being too late is the entire point. That's why I went. I wanted a job where I could not fail anyone, because they were already gone. Dana, my wife, didn't love the hours, but she understood it better than I expected. She'd watched the ambulance years eat me. She said as long as I was sleeping, she could live with anything. And for a while, I slept fine. The night shift at a cemetery is the most peaceful work there is, if you let it be. I had a routine. Clock in at the gatehouse at 7. Take the radio off the charger, do a slow drive of the loop road in the cart with the headlights off so my eyes could learn the dark, check the chapel doors, check the maintenance shed, check the columbarium wall where the cremated folks were, check the front gate chain, then back to the gatehouse to write the first log entry, and then long stretches of nothing, broken up by hourly walks. There's a discipline to it that I came to love. The log was simple, a green spiral notebook, 1 line an hour, time and a note. 2300, all secure. 0000, all secure. 11 years of all secure. I have most of those notebooks still. I've gone back through them, looking for the night it started, and I can never quite find it, because the beginning didn't look like a beginning. That's the thing I most need you to understand. None of it looked like what it was. The radio's worth explaining, because the radio is where it came in. We had a base station in the gatehouse and a handheld I carried, and they talked to each other and to the maintenance crews during the day. And that was it. Short range, line of sight basically, over 200 acres of rolling ground. At night, I was the only one with a unit live. So the radio should have been dead air from 7 to 7, except for me checking in with myself out of habit, which a lot of solo guys do. You key up and say your location into the nothing just to hear a human voice, even your own. The other men who'd worked the post before me did it too. There was a previous overnight man, a fellow named Avery, who'd done it for 19 years before me and trained me for my first 2 weeks. And Avery had a habit of narrating his whole loop into the handset, soft, like a man talking to himself in a kitchen. I picked it up from him. By year 3, I was doing it without noticing. Avery is part of this, so let me put him in early. He was past 70 when I met him. Lean and slow and careful, the kind of old man who'd clearly seen the place change around him for 2 decades and had made a private peace with it. He showed me the loop, the doors, the log. And on my last training night, sitting in the gatehouse with the space heater ticking, he told me one thing that I wrote off as an old man's superstition. and that I have since come to understand was the most generous warning anyone ever gave me. He said, and I remember it exactly because of how plainly he said it. If you hear someone call logbook in on the radio at night, you write it in the log, and you do not key back. You log it, you let it pass, and you finish your shift. I asked him, call in how? There's nobody out here at night. Who's going to call? And he looked at me with no drama at all, the way you'd tell a man where the breaker box is, and he said, sometimes the old calls come back through. It doesn't mean anything. It can't hurt you unless you answer it. And then he packed up his thermos and he went home. And 3 weeks later, he had a stroke in his sleep, and that was the end of Avery. I went to the service. I thought about his warning maybe twice in the years after. And both times I thought, poor old guy. 19 years alone out here. Of course you'd start hearing things. I was kind about it in my head. I was also wrong. And the kindness was a way of not taking him seriously, which is its own kind of cruelty, though I didn't know that yet. I almost told Dana about it the next morning. I had the words ready over coffee, but it sounded insane in my mouth before I even said it. A grown man rattled by static, and she had enough on her with her mother's health that year, so I let it go. That was the first thing I didn't say. There would be a lot of things I didn't say. I've learned that the not saying is how these things grow. They need a man who keeps quiet, and I was very, very good at keeping quiet. I'd kept quiet for 14 years on an ambulance, swallowing every call, and the cemetery was supposed to be where I finally got to stop swallowing. And instead it turned out to be the place that asked the most of me. The calls didn't come often at first, weeks apart, always between about 1 and 4 in the morning, the dead hours. Always that same flat, accepting tone. And here's the detail that took me an embarrassingly long time to understand. The detail that should have ended my skip theory in a single night, and didn't, because I didn't want it ended. They were always medical. They were always the back half of an emergency. Not the screaming part, the after part. A man's voice saying, "She's breathing, but I can't wake her. How long?" A young guy saying, "I did the compressions like you said. I'm still doing them. Where are you?" An older man, very calm, saying, "You don't need to hurry now. I just need someone to come sit with him." Every one of them was a person waiting for help that was already too late, or never coming, narrating their helplessness into the dark. And every one of them was speaking as if there were a dispatcher on the other end, taking the information down. They weren't talking to nobody. They were talking to me. They thought I was the one coming. I told myself it was a frequency thing. I convinced myself for a while, with real effort, that our old base station had drifted onto or near some archived dispatch frequency, that I was somehow receiving recordings, training tapes, old logged calls being replayed off some county server, that there was a boring technical reason a cemetery radio was full of dying people at 2 in the morning. I even called the alarm company that maintained our equipment, told the guy I was getting bleed over, asked if our base could be picking up an old EMS channel. He pulled up our specs and told me, friendly and certain, that our gear couldn't reach any public safety band, wrong frequency range entirely, that what I was getting was almost certainly skip from CB or family radio, and that I shouldn't worry about it unless it interfered with my own comms. I thanked him. I wrote it down. I held on to that explanation like a railing. The man said it couldn't be what it was, so it wasn't. I have noticed that about myself my whole life. When I am frightened, I go looking for an expert to tell me I don't have to be. And I will take a thin comfort from a man on the phone over the evidence of my own ears every time. The co-worker piece came in that 9th year too. And it's the part I understand least, so I'll just tell it the way it happened, and let you make of it what you can. We got a new dayside grounds hire that spring, a man named Coyle. Younger than me, maybe 40. Quiet, good with the mowers, kept to himself. Day shift, so our paths only crossed at the 7 a.m. handoff, him coming in as I was leaving. And one of those mornings, a bad one, after a night where I'd logged 2 calls and slept 0, Coyle was unloading his truck by the shed, and I walked over, mostly just to be near another living person. And I said something half-joking about the radio acting up at night, full of weird traffic. Did the day crew ever get that? And Coyle didn't laugh, and he didn't look up from his toolbox, and he said, in this even untroubled way, "Oh, that's the old center. It comes back on at night sometimes. You just don't answer it. You'll be fine." And then he picked up his weed trimmer and walked off toward the lower acreage, like he'd told me the soda machine $8 sometimes. I stood there in the morning light, not knowing what to do with that. The old center. He'd said it like a known thing, a fact of the property, the way you'd mention which doors stick. I went home and I couldn't sleep, and finally that afternoon I drove back out, hadn't say 9 off the clock, and I went to the little county historical society in town. An old woman behind a card table, basically. And I asked her if there'd ever been anything out where Hollow Reach was now, before the cemetery. And she pulled a folder, and she told me, pleasant as anything, that the back acreage and the Chapel Hill had been a county facility once, decades back, before my time, before Avery's time even. A regional dispatch and communications post, an emergency operations center, she called it. The place that took the calls for the whole rural end of the county and sent out the trucks, back when there was just the one set of trucks for 1,000 square miles. She said it had run for years, and then a newer county complex was built closer to the highway, and the old hill site was decommissioned and sat empty, and eventually the land was sold, and the memorial park went in over it. She said the chapel was built more or less on the old footprint. She said it like local trivia. She had no idea she was handing me the floor of my own life. So now I knew the shape of the thing, or thought I did, and knowing made it worse, not better, because knowing took away the skip. There was no frequency drift, no county server, no training tape. There had been a place on that hill whose entire purpose, for years, was to receive the voices of people in their worst moment and to send help across the dark to reach them. And that place was gone. And I was the only man on the hill at night. And I sat in a stone gatehouse with a radio, doing, I realized, with a sick lurch one night, exactly what they had done. Sitting alone in the dark, receiving voices, deciding who got an answer. I had built my whole second life around being a man who could not fail anyone, because everyone he watched over was already dead. And I had walked, without knowing it, straight into the one job on earth where the dead still called for help. And I was the only one who could pick up. That should have been when I quit. I want to mark that clearly. The place where a smarter or less wounded man would have handed in his radio and his keys and gone to work at a hardware store. But I didn't. And I owe you the real reason, not a flattering one. I stayed because part of me wanted them. That's the ugliest true thing in this whole account, and I'm putting it near the front so you can judge the rest of it correctly. For 14 years I'd been the man who came. I'd been useful in the specific way that ruined me, and then I'd quit being useful, and I'd been hollow ever since, watching grass and locked doors. And here was a radio full of people who needed exactly the thing I used to be, who were calling out into the dark for a unit, for a dispatcher, for someone to say, "I've got you, help is coming." Avery had told me not to answer, Coyle had told me not to answer. Every instinct of self-preservation told me not to answer. And I sat in that gatehouse night after night, with my thumb a half-inch from the button, listening to people die politely into the static. And the wanting in me grew until it was bigger than the fear. I missed being needed so badly that a haunting felt like an offer. I held the line for a while. 8, 10 months. I logged them and I let them pass, like Avery said. Oh, 314, radio anomaly, male voice, no contact. I built a little wall of procedure around the wanting, the way I'd once built procedure around grief on the ambulance. And the calls, I swear to you, seem to learn me. That's the part I can't make sound sane. Over those months, they got closer to me. Early on, they were strangers, generic, the flat voices of nobody I knew. But as the year turned, the details in them started to fit. A caller mentioned a kitchen floor. A caller mentioned doing compressions while the mother stood in the doorway. One night, a young man's voice, breaking, said the exact phrase my own partner had said on that last call 14 years before. The call that ended my old life, a phrase I had never told anyone, not Donna, not a counselor, no one. He said it into the radio at 3 a.m, my partner's words, in a voice that was not my partner's. And I sat there with the green notebook open and my pen not moving, and I understood that the thing on the radio had been going through me, that it had found the call I'd buried, and it was reading it back to me, not to taunt me, that's the thing, not cruelly, but the way you'd hand someone a phone and say, "It's for you." Like it had finally found the right caller. Like all those months, it had been flipping through me looking for the case that would make me key up, and it had found it. And I keyed up. After all that holding, after Avery and Coyle and the Historical Society and 10 months of discipline, the night it used my partner's words, I put my thumb on the button, and when I answered, I couldn't not. It had reached past everything I'd built and touched the one thing I quit the world to protect. And I keyed up, and I said the words I used to say, the real ones. The dispatcher words. I said, "I copy. Help is on the way. Stay with him. Tell me what you see." 11 years of all secure. And I broke it in one sentence because a dead voice said the thing that broke me once already. The radio went dead. Not static. Dead. The particular total silence of a unit with nothing on the other end. The silence you only notice because the hum is gone. And then, while I sat there with my heart going and the notebook open and the awful relief of having finally answered still warm in my chest, every monitor on the wall went to snow at once, all 12 of them, and then came back. And when they came back, the cameras were not showing me the cemetery. They were showing me the same grounds, the same hill and chapel and loop road, but in daylight, in a daylight that did not exist because it was 3 a.m. And the buildings on the screens were not my buildings. The chapel was gone. Where it stood, there was a low cinder block structure with a radio mast on its roof and county vehicles parked in a row out front, and men in old uniforms walking between them. And across the bottom of every screen, burned into the picture the way a timestamp burns in, were numbers counting. And it took me a moment to understand that they were counting calls, a running tally, the way a busy night racks them up. And the number was climbing, fast, faster, the way it climbs when something terrible is happening across a whole county at once, and every phone is ringing. And there are not enough trucks, and not enough men. And the calls are coming faster than anyone can answer them. And the base station, dead a moment before, came alive all at once with all of them. Not one voice, every voice. All the calls I'd logged and let pass over 10 months, and 1,000 more I'd never heard, all of them at once. A wall of flat, patient, dying people saying my husband's gone down. She won't wake up. How long? Where are you, please? All of it pouring out of one small speaker in a stone room. And over it, under it, threaded through it, a steady professional voice, a dispatcher's voice, calm the way I used to be calm, saying to all of them at once, "Stand by, we're sending someone, stand by." And I understood, sitting there, that I had just told it I was available. That for 10 months the post had been ringing and ringing into the dark, looking for a man who would key up and accept the calls, the way it had been built to, and that I had finally answered, and that the operations center, after all these years dark, had a dispatcher again. It had me, and the number at the bottom of the screen kept climbing. And somewhere out in the real dark of the back acreage, past the creek, in the woods where the old footprint lay under the new graves, I heard, faint and getting less faint, the sound of people starting to come up the hill toward the only light on it, which was mine. I did not run, and I want to be clear that it wasn't courage. A braver man runs. A braver man drops the handset and goes out the gatehouse door and down the loop road to his truck and never sets foot on that hill again. What kept me in the chair was the opposite of courage, was the wanting. Still, even then, even with that number climbing on the screens and the sound of feet coming up through the wet grass, some part of me that had been starving for 14 years was being fed, and it didn't care what was feeding it. A dispatcher with a board full of calls is a man with a purpose. And I had not had a purpose since I signed that last run sheet and walked out of the bay. And so I sat there while the speaker poured its 1,000 voices at me, and I felt, God forgive me, useful. The first one reached the gatehouse window maybe 4 minutes after I keyed up. I heard her before I saw her, the soft scuff of shoes on the stone path. And then she was standing in the spill of my desk lamp. A woman in a housecoat, middle-aged, her hands working at each other the way people's hands work when they've been waiting a long time for something to arrive. She looked at me through the glass, and her face was not a horror. That's what I need you to understand. There was nothing rotted or wrong about her face. She just looked tired and frightened and relieved all at once. The exact face of a woman who has finally seen the ambulance turn onto her street. And she said through the glass, in that flat, accepting voice, "Are you the one who's coming? He's just down the hill. He's not answering me anymore. Will you come now?" Every instinct I'd built my old career on said open the door and go. That's the trap of it. The thing didn't come at me as a monster asking to be let in. It came at me as a person asking to be helped. And I was a man who had quit the world specifically because he could no longer bear to help, and could no longer bear not to. It found the exact crack in me, and it stood in it in a housecoat and asked for the one thing I had never once been able to refuse a real person. And I had my hand on the door latch. I had it half turned. And what stopped me, the only thing that stopped me, was the green notebook open on the desk and Avery's voice in it. Not written there, but in my memory of the night he said it. Log it. Let it pass. Finish your shift. It can't hurt you unless you answer. I had already answered once on the radio. I understood, with my hand on the latch and the woman waiting with that patient, ruined face, that the radio had been the first door, and this was the second. And that the thing about doors is that each one you open is a permission, and I had given one permission already, and the whole hill had heard it. And if I opened this one, I would be giving the bigger permission, the real one. I would be telling the operations center that its dispatcher was not just on the air, but on his feet and coming, that the trucks could roll, that help was on the way, and that everything the old place had been built to do could begin again with me as its single working part. I took my hand off the latch. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and there was nothing noble in it, because I didn't do it to save anyone. I did it because Avery's flat old voice was louder in that moment than my hunger. And I have spent 3 years being grateful to a dead man I was once kind enough to disbelieve. The woman at the glass didn't get angry. That was worse. Her face just folded, slowly, into a deeper version of the tiredness, and she said, all right then," the way the truly defeated say it. And she turned and went back down the path into the dark. And behind her, in the dark, I could see now that there were more of them. A slow scatter of figures coming up the slope from the creek and the back acreage, unhurried, patient. Each one of them a call I had logged or a call I never got to. Each one of them a person who had once said, "Help is coming," into a phone and been told to stand by. And was still, all these years later, standing by on the hill, standing by for a unit that had been decommissioned before I was born. And here is the reveal, the thing that reorganized everything behind me. And I'll give it to you the way it came to me, slow and sickening over the rest of that night. The operations center hadn't haunted that hill because something terrible happened there. Nothing terrible happened there. That was the whole horror of it. The terrible things happened out in the county, in kitchens and on roadsides and in back bedrooms across 1,000 square miles. And the operations center was just the place that heard them. For years, that little cinder block building had been the ear the whole county screamed into. Every worst night anyone had, it arrived there as a voice, and a man or a woman sat in that room and took it down and sent what help there was, which was never enough, because it never is. There are never enough trucks and never enough hands, and the calls always come faster than the answers. The place had absorbed decades of that, decades of being the one who hears and cannot reach in time. And when they decommissioned it and built the new complex by the highway and let the hill go dark, all of that, all those years of received helplessness, didn't go anywhere. It just sat there in the ground under the new graves. A switchboard with no operator, ringing and ringing into the dark, waiting for someone to sit back down at the board. Avery had sat near it for 19 years and never answered. And so it had only ever whispered at him, a call now and then, easy enough to log and ignore. The men before Avery, I have to assume, the same. The post had survived all those years precisely because every man who held it had been disciplined enough, or frightened enough, or unbroken enough to keep his thumb off the button. The job, the real job, the one nobody wrote in the manual, was not to watch the grounds. It was to sit by the dead switchboard and not pick up. 11 years of all secure wasn't a man guarding graves. It was a man being asked every night to become the operator again, and refusing. And I had refused for 10 months, and then, on the one night it found the exact words to reach the exact wound, I had picked up. I had done the one thing the post existed to prevent. I had given the operations center an operator. And an operations center with an operator does what operations centers do. It dispatches. It puts the calls together with the only available unit. And the only available unit, the only one who'd said help is on the way and meant it, was me. I understood. Sitting in that chair with the figures gathering patient on the lawn and the speaker still pouring its 1,000 standing by voices, that I was not the prey here. That's what makes this hard to tell as a horror story. They didn't want to hurt me. Not one of them ever tried to hurt me. They wanted me to come. They wanted the thing I had promised when I keyed up, which was rescue, arrival, the unit pulling onto the street, somebody finally coming. They had been waiting decades for a dispatcher who would not just take the call but get up and answer it himself. And I had announced that I was that man. And now they were all coming to be answered, every single one of them. And there was no truck and no crew and no hospital and no help. There was only me, one tired ex-paramedic in a stone gatehouse, who had told an entire county's worth of the unanswered dead that help was on the way. The phone rang. The real one, the landline, the gatehouse phone that connected to the office and, in theory, the outside world. It had not rung at night in 11 years because there was no one to call it. I looked at it. The figures on the lawn had stopped advancing, all of them at once. The way a room of people goes still when a phone rings. And I understood that they were waiting to see what I would do, because I was the operator now, and an operator answers the phone. And I want you to sit with the position I was in, because it's the same position the Post had been putting men in for 50 years, and I was the one who finally failed it. If I answered the phone, I was working the board. If I worked the board, I was the dispatcher. And the dispatcher's whole purpose is to send help. And there was no help to send except the man himself. And the man himself was me. Every door, every button, every ring was the same door. They were all the door Avery warned me about. And I had already gone through one. I didn't answer the phone. I let it ring. It rang 11 times. I counted them. And on the 11th, it stopped. And when it stopped, the figures on the lawn made a sound. All together, a low exhale, not angry, just disappointed. The sound a waiting room makes when the name called isn't theirs again. And then the woman in the housecoat was back at the glass. And beside her now, an old man. And behind them, a young guy with his shirt soaked through, the one I think had done the compressions, all of them at the glass now. Not pounding, not clawing, just looking in at me with those patient, ruined faces. And the woman said, very gently, the gentleness of it, the worst part. You said help was on the way. We heard you say it. We've been waiting such a long time. You can't tell a person help is coming and then just sit there. And she was right. That's the thing. In the moral universe of that hill, she was completely right. I had said it. I'd taken the call and given the promise. And the promise is sacred. It's the one thing you never break. You never tell a person help is coming if it isn't. That's the first thing they teach you. And the last thing you forget. And I had said the words into the radio to make my own pain stop. And now a county of the unanswered were at my window, holding me to them. The wound that brought me there, the need to be the man who comes, had been turned all the way around and pointed back at me. I had wanted to be needed. I was needed now. I was needed by more people than any one man could ever reach, all at once, forever. And there was no way to be too late anymore, because too late was where they all already lived. And there was no way to fail them because they could not die again. And so the one comfort I'd built my whole second life on, the cemetery comfort, the these people are already past help comfort, became the thing that damned me, because it meant I could never finish. There was no end to the call. The call would never clear. I would be on the board, with help on the way, and no help possible, forever. I'll tell you what I did, and it is the morally bad thing, and I won't dress it up. I had keyed up once and made the promise. I understood now that the promise was the door, that the operations center ran on the dispatcher's word, on the saying of help is on the way, that the words themselves were the power that made it real. the same way my words had once made a real ambulance roll. And I understood that there was, maybe, a way to break the connection. And it was as ugly as the thing it was breaking. I had to take it back. I had to do the one thing a dispatcher must never do, the thing that violates the only commandment of the work. I had to key up and tell them all that no one was coming. I picked up the handset. The figures at the glass went still, hopeful. Every patient face turned toward the light. Because a man picking up the radio is a man about to send help. And I keyed the button. And I held it. And I made myself say it. And my voice broke saying it because I had spent 14 years never once saying it to a living soul. I said, "There's no unit. There's no help coming. There was never anyone coming. I can't reach you. I'm sorry. Nobody's on the way." I said it to all of them at once. To the woman in the house coat and the old man and the kid with the compressions and the 1,000 voices in the speaker and the number on the screen. I said it to the whole county of the unanswered. The one true thing the operations center had spent 50 years existing to prevent anyone from ever having to hear. I told the dead that help was not coming and never had been. The speaker died, not into static, into nothing. The deep nothing of a unit with no signal at all. The number on the screen stopped climbing, and then the screens went to snow, and then went black. And the figures at the glass, I watched them. The woman first, her face did not crumble. It did the other thing. It eased. It let go. A lifetime of waiting, going out of it all at once. And she looked at me with something I can only call gratitude. The terrible gratitude of a person who has finally, after decades, been told the truth. And she turned and walked down the hill. And the old man turned, and the kid and all of them down across the lawn toward the creek and the back acreage and the old footprint, unhurried. The way people leave a place when there's no longer any reason to stay. And the dark took them. And the gatehouse was just a stone room with a space heater again. And I sat in it shaking. And I did not stop shaking until the sun came up. I want to tell you that telling the truth was the heroic thing, that I freed them, that I laid the whole hill to rest with 3 honest sentences. And maybe I did, I don't know. The calls never came again. Not once in the 2 years I stayed on. The radio went back to dead air and Skip and my own voice. And Coyle never mentioned the old center again, and I never asked. But here is why it isn't a happy ending, and why I quit answering my phone, and why I'm setting this down at all. Because what I actually did, the real thing under the dressing, was abandon them. They had been waiting 50 years for somebody to come, and a man finally sat down at the board. The first one in half a century with the heart and the training to be their dispatcher. The first one who keyed up and said, "I've got you." And that man, when the cost came due, when being needed turned out to mean being needed forever by people he could never reach, that man took it back. I told them no one was coming so that I could go home. I broke the one promise to save myself, the unbearable weight of keeping it. I dressed it up as mercy, telling the dead the truth, but I know what it was. It was the same thing I'd done on the ambulance the day I couldn't open the door. It was a man who could not bear to be the one who comes, choosing not to come, and calling it kindness, because the alternative was being honest about his own limits. That's the wound, you see. It went all the way around. I quit the ambulance because I couldn't stand failing people who needed me. I took the cemetery because the dead couldn't need me, and so I couldn't fail them. And the hill found the lie in that. The way these things find the lie in a man. And it gave me exactly what I'd been pretending I wanted. A board full of people who needed me and could never die on me. and I discovered that what I'd actually wanted all along was not to help anyone. It was to be the kind of man who helps without ever having to pay what helping costs. And when the bill came, I did what I always do. I picked up the radio and I made the need go away. Dana knows something happened. I came home that morning gray and silent, and I stayed gray for a long time. And she's a patient woman, and she let me be. I never told her. That's the last not saying, and it's the one I'll carry, because she's the only person who might have understood. And I let her think it's grief, the old ambulance grief, because that story makes me a wounded man, and the true story makes me something I can't say out loud at the kitchen table. I left Hollow Reach 2 years after that night, told them my knees, took the hardware store job after all. There's a young man on the post now. I went out once, the week before I left, and I sat him down in the gatehouse with the space heater ticking. And I told him the same thing Avery told me, word for word, log it and let it pass and never key back. It can't hurt you unless you answer. And he looked at me the way I once looked at Avery, kind and unbelieving. Poor old guy, 19 years out here. Of course you'd start hearing things. And I let him. I didn't push, because the truth is, I hope he never has to believe me. I hope he's a more disciplined man than I was, or a less wounded one, and that the board stays dark for him the whole length of his service, and that he retires never knowing what he was really guarding or what it cost the one man before him who picked up. I quit answering my own phone because of the way it sounds in an empty house at night, the way any ringing sounds now, like a call coming into a board, like someone on the worst night of their life going quiet and practical and saying my husband's gone down and isn't answering me. Will you come now? I can't hear a phone ring without my thumb wanting the button and the rest of me knowing what answering costs. So I let it ring. 11 times, usually, before it stops. I've gotten good at counting and not moving. It turns out that's the whole job, the real one, the one nobody writes down. Not coming. Sitting in the light while the dark fills up with people who need you, and keeping your hand off the latch and calling it survival because there isn't a better word. And knowing every single night that the man who finally sat down at the board, after 50 years of men who didn't, was the one who couldn't stay.